All right, viewers know my preferred habitat is optimism rather than pessimism, and I also believe we are in a modest recovery, so all is not bad. But there is a lot of fear and uncertainty out there, and our last question this evening is how can we move from being pessimists on the economy to being much more optimistic? And in fact, what needs to be changed in Washington, if anything, to restore confidence, jobs, and growth? So let's talk to Democratic strategist Richard Socarides. He's a former senior advisor to President Bill Clinton. Let's also talk to Peter Morisi, University of Maryland professor, former head economist for the International Trade Commission. Richard, let me start with you. Look, I believe there is a recovery going on, but I was chagrined today with consumer confidence dropping to a 5-month low, and the rate of job creation looks awfully weak well over a year into the expansion. Richard, ask you, what should be changed in Washington from your perspective on the Democratic side?
Well, first, let me say, Larry, that I like the topic tonight, and I like your optimism, and I like that you're saying that we're in the middle of a modest recovery, because after a modest recovery comes a full recovery. And I think it's a very interesting question. I mean, and to be thoughtful about it, I think probably the number one thing that would be helpful in Washington is if we could get somehow at changing the basic culture, the culture we have where both sides seem to believe that it's in their best interest to oppose whatever the other side suggests. I think from a Democratic perspective, and if I were giving advice to the president, I would suggest to him that he be more open and transparent, less scripted. I think, if you want to talk very big picture, I think that if we could draw down and get out of Afghanistan more quickly and stop sending all this money overseas to a war we can't win. But these are ideas over and above and beyond what he's already done. I mean, I think healthcare reform, is going in the right direction and has got us on the right track. I think this financial regulatory bill. But I take from the question that you're looking for these bigger picture ideas, and those are some of the things that I would throw out.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Peter Morisi, let me go to you. Essentially, Richard is saying after a modest recovery will come a fuller recovery. Do you agree with that?
If the president can abstain from raising taxes and he has to stop talking about how terrible the Bush years were. We certainly had the credit collapse in 2008. But 05, 06, 07 were great years. Unemployment was below 5%. Instead, he's got a Treasury Secretary running around telling us how terrible things were and how we have to completely remake the system if we're going to succeed. And at the same time, there are economists that are telling us we're going to have high unemployment for the next 5 years. It is possible to get unemployment below 5%. We don't need to roll back the Bush tax cuts, but we do need to stop spending money like a drunken sailor on Liberty.
Richard, that's an interesting point. Is it possible that Team Obama is both too pessimistic and too partisanly political, as has been said?
Well, I think both sides are too partisan politically. And I think, one side has to call a truce first, so I think it's very hard to get out of what is really a circular problem. And I think that, the president has talked about reducing the deficit. I think he's serious about the deficit. You saw when he was up in Canada a couple of weeks ago at the international economic meetings that he said at the very end, he said, I'm very serious about reducing the deficit. I think he's very serious about this deficit commission that you mentioned earlier that Erskine Bowles is co-heading.
Peter Morisi, let me ask you your specifics to make things better. Besides the issue of bashing Bush, some political things will never go away. Republicans and Democrats bashed Herbert Hoover for a very long time. But, Peter, if you could wave a magic wand, what I want is for companies to unleash the $2 trillion in excess cash, invest much more heavily, and create a whole lot more jobs, Peter. How should we go about doing that?
Well, I think, first of all, other than the estate tax issue, we ought to extend the Bush tax cuts out, another 5 years. We only had a $145 billion deficit in 2007. This year we have one 10 times as large. The difference has been all that Great Recession spending that hasn't gone away that should. The Obama administration simply needs to take a look at the 2007 budget and, other than the health care spending, which funds itself, say, why are we spending so much more money now? And get it down.
We're spending a lot of this money, right, because of the wars we're in and because of
but we were in a war then. We were in war. We had the 2 wars then. You can't use that one.
Just think if we could keep this money at home.
Yeah, but the thing is, Even if you stop the two wars, you're still in a terrible situation. You'll take $200 billion, $300 billion off the deficit that way, but you need to find $1 trillion. Simply raising marginal tax rates, then having Erskine-Bowles Commission suggest a value-added tax. We spend 50% more on health care than Germany does for about the same outcomes. The health care reforms really didn't deal with that problem, and I think we can.
Richard, let me just ask you, look, you see this in the polling day. A lot of people think we've had too much big government too fast. Mass stimulus, health care, financial regulation.
Right.
Today, President Obama called for climate change, another gigantic bill. Is it time for the Obama administration to stop and pause? Have they moved too far away from the center to the left? Would that calm fears and that might increase confidence if they hold back on these gigantic legislative initiatives?
I don't think so. I think, the President Obama was elected with a mandate of change, and I think that he's going to implement as best as he can these bold ideas, health care reform, financial regulatory reform, getting us out of this economic crisis. I do not think the answer is to be more centrist. I think, in fact, that he should be more populist. I think that he needs to go after more aggressively some of these entrenched interests that are, including the Wall Street interests, quite frankly.
All right. I got to leave it there, gentlemen. I appreciate the discussion. Richard Socarides and Peter Marisi up next. Stay with me. I got a couple last words for you.